Meanwhile, Joe, you're also looking at NVIDIA's performance after the event as well. What exactly are you keying on, and what exactly do you think we could see in terms of the upside or downside and some of the volume that goes along with it?
I think the important thing for NVIDIA is, can it escape the macro? Can it overcome the macro with what it's going to say? It's going to be a very clear message. They're going to talk about Blackwell Ultra. They're going to talk about the AI platform moving forward, just like they did with last year's conference talking about Blackwell. And the message clearly is going to be, keep spending on our chips. But if we go back and if we could, if sunny Englewood Cliffs, New Jersey could pull up a chart of NVIDIA last year at the GTC conference, you'll see from the middle of March at the initiation of the conference until the middle of April, the stock rallies after the GTC conference about 8%. And then guess what? The macro gets in its way. And I fear that's exactly where we are right now with NVIDIA. They've already alleviated the concerns surrounding DeepSeek with raising their guidance. They're going to introduce further AI strategies that are going to get people excited and have people keep spending. But is the macro environment ultimately going to be the problem? I'm concerned it is.
And if I could just follow up 1 second with you, Jim, NVIDIA, because we framed it around NVIDIA as a catalyst this week. What are the thoughts there? This is a name that you are a part of.
Yeah, and very happily a part of. I think everybody has to understand there is no free lunch in investing. You don't get reward without risk. And the risk is volatility, which means that you get drawdowns like this. Another friend of the show, Adam Parker, has done some excellent research that says if you want to get 10 baggers like NVIDIA, you have to be prepared for routine 50% drawdowns, which has happened a lot in NVIDIA's last 5 years. I'm not saying that that's where we are now. I actually think that it's probably, Christina pointed this out, very attractively priced at 26 times forward earnings for earnings per share growth at 53% going forward. That's a PEG ratio of 0.5, and boy, I love that. So I feel very good about NVIDIA, but I'm going to close by going back to where I started. There is no free lunch. If you want the rewards that an NVIDIA brings, you have to be prepared for the risk and the volatility.
All right, Bryn, I want to bring you into the discussion as well, because you have recently added to that position in NVIDIA on this kind of recent downtrend that we've seen short term. Take us through why and just why it is an important holding for you.
Yeah, I think Jim and I both added to it last week. So NVIDIA has been trading within a pretty tight band over the last 9 months between about 109, 110 to about 145. And so it got down there last week. And I feel that the fundamentals and the price of NVIDIA have completely separated, which happens. It happens on the upside, it happens on the downside. And so to Jim's point, they have very high margins. They're growing top line in the 50%. It's a cheap stock. And I think that AI will continue, and it's in the early stages. And if you talk to anybody in the data centers, anybody at the hyperscalers, none of them are saying we are going to build less data centers. None of them are saying we are going to reduce CapEx. All of them are continuing to spend, and NVIDIA, we know, is probably the highest margin recipient of all of those dollars. Now, to Jim's point of the risk, I think one of the risks and one of the clouds over the name are with the tariffs. This is a national security issue about the platform that they offer in China. And so there hasn't been a lot of saber rattling about that, which is good right now. I think that's one of the reasons the stock bounced with the market. But I think the market would sniff that out well before we would see that in print if there was going to be more extreme export controls on their products. So we'll have to wait and see. To me, that's the biggest risk. But once again, I first bought the stock in 2018 because there was some like Ethereum slowdown, and that's why most people used their chips at the time. And to Jim's point, volatility is the price of admission, but this to me is one of the most durable, cheapest of the tech names out there, and it's right in front of investors to take advantage of.
I was critical of NVIDIA on that move higher. So I've actually welcomed this repricing, this revaluation of these Mag 7 names. Tesla, let's put Tesla to the side, but let's talk about NVIDIA. I think we're going to see some re-enthusiasm, not sure if that's a word, but we're looking for some re-enthusiasm with this GTC conference, and we're going to hopefully see NVIDIA kind of get the investor base re-excited about the AI theme, which has worked so well. But I do believe there's been opportunity. When we go back about 6 or 7 trading days, Kelly, we saw the third largest put options on the S&P 500. That was the third largest ever. What do we see subsequent to that? We saw massive indiscriminate selling. Last week, it was hard to watch. Everything was getting sold. That is when the opportunity comes about, in my opinion, and I've harped on this a lot on the exchange. You want to be positioned for risk mitigation. You want to be buying puts when the VIX is at 14. You don't want to start buying puts when the VIX is at 25, 28, or even 30. So that's where I think there's opportunity inside of this March Madness, which has certainly happened despite the fact that we haven't had tip-off in the basketball tournament yet.
You were cautious on NVIDIA going back to last summer. It's largely been kind of chopping wood since then. So are you a buyer of NVIDIA now? Are you a buyer of Tesla now? Which of the Mag 7?
So I'm long NVIDIA. I bought it last week and actually aggressively sold those 100 puts. Didn't feel great when it was down at 107, but here we are collecting that premium. Happy to own NVIDIA lower than $100. But at this point, in this moment in time, we've had a nice $10 appreciation in the move. I'm being very tactical.
Shares of NVIDIA are lower today as they kick off their annual GPU technology conference. All eyes will be on CEO Jensen Huang's keynote address tomorrow, where he's expected to make new announcements on AI chips. Later on Thursday, the company will host its first ever Quantum Day, with CEOs of notable players in the space taking stage alongside Huang. NVIDIA has scrambled to retain its AI crown ever since DeepSeek sparked a sell-off in AI stocks back in January. It's 22% below its all-time high amid intensifying competition. So will it do enough to entice skeptics? Let's ask our next guest. He's got a neutral on the stock. Gil Luria is senior software analyst at D.A. Davidson. Gil, we made a Freudian slip that we said it's GPU event, but it's GTC. And I was curious the other day, I thought, what does GTC stand for? And it stands for GPU Tech Conference or something. Point being, this is a super, super wonky thing to have so many people purportedly excited about. Is it overhyped?
Not at all. It's the main AI event of the year. Let's not forget to give NVIDIA credit for a lot of the advancements we have in AI are because they a long time ago realized the potential for their graphics chips to provide the ability to do these transformer calculations that make all of this AI possible, first in the labs at Google and then at the labs of OpenAI. And over the last few years, NVIDIA has done a lot to promote the whole ecosystem. That's what this event is about, inviting everybody that's anybody in AI to talk about what they can accomplish together using NVIDIA's products.
Right. So I've read a few notes. I mean, you tell me yours, but Blackwell Ultra, right? That's one of the things. What are the keywords that a non-expert like myself needs to hear to know if the stock is going to rally or, possible problems that could cause it to sell off?
So in terms of the products, there's Blackwell Ultra that's coming out this year, and then Rubin that's probably coming out next year. And what we're going to be listening for from Jensen Huang is multiples. How much faster is Blackwell Ultra than Blackwell? How much faster, how many teraflops per second can Rubin do faster than Blackwell Ultra? That's going to tell us a lot about if NVIDIA can continue to maintain its product leadership over the ASIC chip providers like Broadcom, like Marvell, increasingly like Huawei.
Gil, what about this idea that kind of shocked markets a couple weeks ago when DeepSeek came out and it was done on a much smaller platform and implied that you need many fewer chips to do high-level AI? Is that idea kind of faded now, or is NVIDIA just powering past that with more powerful chips that people are going to need to buy no matter what? If they're buying chips, they're going to buy these high-end ones.
That idea really shouldn't fade, because what's happening with these AI models is they're getting so much smaller, so much faster, that we're not far away from a day where we'll be able to do inference calculation on our device, on a phone, on a PC, not at a data center. And so this is very important for thinking about how long of a runway NVIDIA has is, when do models get small enough that we don't do inference at a data center? And since pre-training, or what we used to refer to as training, is something that's starting to hit a wall as well, we're not sure how many data centers we're actually going to need 2, 3, 5 years from now. And that's the concern that overhangs NVIDIA.
So is the implication there that there's some sort of NVIDIA cliff out there that we don't know where it is, but at some point demand is really going to fall off?
That's exactly why the stock has lagged so much over the last 9 months, is that we don't know that. And in fact, we think this may even be peak year. 2025 may end up being the peak year. If we don't have a handoff from NVIDIA's current largest customers like Microsoft and Amazon that have said their chip buying is going to plateau this year, to other customers like CoreWeave or SoftBank, then this may end up being peak year for NVIDIA chips.
So that tone of caution, Gil, is interesting because there are others who say, this technology is really just starting to go mainstream. And I take your point about using it on the phone someday, but the best models out there are still the ones that seem to be most chip intensive, right? Like Grok 3 is amazing. It's and is that not with 200,000? You tell me what the number is of these GPUs. So if I, as the end user, value having the best experience, the fastest, the most up to date, I like its tone. It's just very useful. So does that tell you, though, that they still need to continue this massive investment in NVIDIA GPUs?
Well, the vast majority of AI searches we're going to do are going to be, what's the best humidifier for this room? How do I entertain my 5-year-old at a restaurant? Those within 2 or 3 years, you'll be able to do on your phone and get terrific performance. Within, again, that time frame, 2, 3, 5 years, the only calculations that we're going to need the biggest frontier models for are the really tough calculations, protein folding, drug development, things like that will, by the way, end up on a quantum computer within 5 or 10 years anyway.
Well, that's the other question, is what does quantum do to this? Because if quantum comes in and accelerates the growth of all this, you can imagine that all of that processing power gets even into smaller and smaller devices. And are you using less chips in a quantum world by an order of magnitude?
That's quite possible. So in that world of 5, 10 years from now, we're probably using our phone for most AI questions, and we're using quantum computers for the really tough questions, at which points data centers just go back to being storage devices as opposed to where we do all of our AI compute.
So then, Gil, last question for you. Have we already hit a top in NVIDIA? Are we past the peak?
I think there's a couple of possible outcomes here. One is that this can continue for a year or two or maybe more, and NVIDIA can continue to grow into next year, in which case there's upside to the stock. If you put 30 times next year's earnings, you get closer to $160. The downside is if this is the peak year and next year is the rollover year, then if they do $3 of earnings, then we're talking about a $60 price target. So that's the range of outcomes in NVIDIA. It's really critical for us to know whether 2026 will be a growth year as consensus expects.
Yikes. All right. That's a good lead in. We went with the whole house humidifier, by the way. So that's good memory. I'm very impressed. Gil, thanks.
Meantime, NVIDIA closing well off its lows of the session, but still ending the day in the red, the worst performer in the SMH semiconductor ETF today. The company holds its AI GTC conference this week with a keynote from CEO Jensen Huang tomorrow. Investors awaiting updates on its Blackwell GPU and its next-gen Rubin chip. Shares still down 22% from record highs hit in January. Over the last week, 3 analysts have lowered their price targets on the stock. So, are expectations priced in? Is this sell the news, Dan?
If it is sell the news, then watch out for the entire generative AI trade. Because, again, we all thought good quarter, good guidance.
Your acronym.
Yeah, the Gen 8. Yeah, exactly. And I played that game right. I mean, listen, it sold off after the results. The stock was already down, right? There was a lot of negative sentiment. A lot of their customers had already sold off over the prior couple weeks. So I just don't know if there's anything new for them to talk about as far as the product roadmap exists right now. So I'd be most worried if the stock, let's say, rallies because it's been down a lot and then fails, because that is just meaning that there's no appetite for this story right now. Or what is the incremental buyer looking for?
So we were talking about this the other day. I'm more interested in what are they seeing right now, not what is a little bit down the road. What are they seeing right now? Has the story changed? We come back to this. Is there going to be a lot more compute needed for inference? And is DeepSeek actually potentially a plus?
Right.
CapEx story. What is, again, CapEx is not written in stone. If companies decide, the environment is not so, we don't view it as favorable, there's too much ambiguity out there, they'll pull back on CapEx. NVIDIA loses to that, I think. That and the fact that they promise in the back half of this year to see a reacceleration of margins. Let's see if they address that as well.
It is amazing that after hearing all of the major hyperscalers come out and raise their CapEx guidance, that there is still disbelief around those numbers, right? That there's still, in investors' minds, an asterisk next to any number given by a Meta, a Google, whoever.
And remember, those numbers and that guidance was well after DeepSeek. It was not. They had a chance to recant or try to hedge their words or something. So I think it's important. I think everyone's saying the same thing, though, that this is an important point for the market. It's a period where the breakdown in semis has been very clear, and it goes all the way back to last summer. NVIDIA's traded the best of all of them, as it should. It's not expensive, but this is an important moment.
So to the asterisk that you just mentioned, they just gave us the guidance. They're not going to change anything, right? So if anything, if they were to come out and be a bit more bullish about that CapEx guidance or upgrade their guidance for the quarter or something, no one would believe it because they had the opportunity on February 26th to do that and nothing's really changed. The other thing I'd say about the asterisk is that, these stocks that got killed in 2022, Meta was down 70% at the lows in October 2022. That stock did not start rallying until they started cutting costs, until they started firing people. They have rationalized their costs as it relates to hiring. The only thing that they'd be able to cut if the stocks were down a lot over the next few months or a year or something would be their CapEx. And that's how these companies do that. We've talked about this for years and years, you know what I mean? When you're spending too much on CapEx, but your revenues slow a little bit, then there's something that has to be reacclimated. And again, we saw why all these stocks sold off after their earnings, Microsoft, Meta, Amazon, and Google, because their revenue had decelerated and they hadn't laid off that CapEx guidance. If anything, they raised it.
All right, I hope you're all doing great today. The S&P finished the day about 0.6% higher, and NVIDIA finished the day about 1.7% lower. GTC is officially underway and will continue throughout the rest of this week. While there's a lot happening at GTC this week, there are two major events to look out for. First is Jensen Huang's keynote on Tuesday, starting at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. NVIDIA leadership told us this would be a news-packed event where we will learn more about Blackwell Ultra, Rubin, and the next clip of product after Rubin. And then the second major event this week is the Financial Analyst Q&A this Wednesday, starting at 11:30 a.m. Eastern, 8:30 a.m. Pacific. Both of these events could potentially be market moving. Now I want to make sure that we're heading into Jensen's keynote with realistic expectations. I'll be honest, I have no idea what will be said during the keynote, and I have no idea how the market will react. And to be honest, it would not surprise me if Jensen reveals amazing new technologies that will help NVIDIA maintain its dominance. And then the stock trades lower in the short term as traders quote unquote sell the news. That would not surprise me at all. At the same time, Jensen may reveal something totally unexpected that shifts the market. That's also a possibility. Regardless of what happens in the short term, I think that Jensen's keynote and the new details we get about NVIDIA's upcoming products will have a positive impact on the stock over the long run. I think that after Jensen's keynote, market participants will gradually become more and more convinced that 2026 is likely to be another growth year for NVIDIA. Right now, there are a lot of analysts and managers that are skeptical about that. And so Jensen revealing new products and subsequently revealing the performance improvements that those new products provide could convince market participants that the hyperscalers will continue increasing CapEx on AI infrastructure. Remember that in Jensen's recent CNBC interview, he explained that AI factories that use Blackwell will see a 25x in token generation compared to AI factories that operate on Hopper. That essentially means a 25x to revenue from AI factories when they upgrade from Hopper to Blackwell. This is important because as long as NVIDIA is delivering massive performance improvements like this, then I think it's safe to say that the hyperscalers will continue purchasing large quantities of NVIDIA's latest products as long as there is not a viable alternative. And as I've said many, many times on this channel, no other company is even close to breaching NVIDIA's competitive moat because NVIDIA has taken a total system approach and they are innovating at every segment of the system. NVIDIA is no longer just a chip company. They're essentially developing entire supercomputers at this point. And so if another company develops a faster chip, that's great, but it doesn't really concern NVIDIA because NVIDIA is innovating and driving efficiency in every segment of the system, not just the chip. I'm looking forward to both Jensen's keynote and the Financial Analyst Q&A this week. While I don't know what the market's reaction will be in the short term, I think this week will set the stage for market participants to finally realize that 2026 is most likely going to be another growth year for NVIDIA, and therefore the stock can go higher over the coming months. At least that's my my view of the situation. Be on the lookout for more NVIDIA content this week as GTC continues. I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about this week. Remember to stay calm in this market. Remember to maintain a long-term perspective and do not make any hasty or irrational decisions. With all of that being said, I hope you all have a great rest of the day, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts about NVIDIA in the comments below. Please leave a like on this video so more people will see it. And while you're down there, please consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.